Story 1. A bit of background. I used to work at a popular grocery store that's known for rolling over for customers. I started working for this grocery store during my gap year before college. I wanted to save up some money before taking on the crippling burden that is student loans. When I started, the job was easy enough, and the vast amount of people were kind. I didn't have to deal with a lot of Karens, and the hours were flexible. I really enjoyed my coworkers and managers. Life seemed great. That is until our department got a new boss. I don't know what it is about new bosses, but they always have to go on a power trip to consolidate power and to show everyone they mean business. Our Karen manager went around the department and started criticizing people for the stupidest things. Even if we were doing our job correctly, she would show up and tell us to work faster, and we were stealing company time. We all hated her, but she is our boss, so we just tried to do what we were told. I pride myself on finding the quickest and most efficient way to do a job. Thanks for the upbringing, Mom. I applied this to any of my duties for the day. It just so happened that the end of the day was coming up, and we had to return products that customers left behind non-perishable. Of course, I was voluntold to go do it. This wasn't an issue, as I had done this plenty of times before. I went about my task and finished in about 10 minutes. The second I got done, my KM called me into her office, and the following conversation ensued. Karen manager, close the door. Now, do you know why I called you in here? Me, no. Karen manager, I am trying to improve efficiency in the department, and you took way too long to do those go-backs. I won't tolerate people slacking off in my department. Do you understand? Me, I wasn't slacking off trying to defend myself. I was just cutting me off, she reiterated. Karen manager, do you understand? Knowing I was being railroaded, I just sighed and said yes. Karen manager, to ensure you don't slack off again, you are forbidden from doing any more go-backs. I don't care if the store manager tells you otherwise. This is my department, and you will do as I say. I'm the boss. I get a smile on my face as I realize what she just said. I nod my head and reply. Me, understood. I won't do go-backs no matter what. My Karen manager replied with an umbrage smile and said, Karen manager, good, now go back to work and don't forget what I said. I'm the boss. It needn't around, so she couldn't see my shit-eating grin and said, Me, don't worry. Message received loud and clear. A few days go by without incident until I finally get a chance to put my malicious compliance into action. The front desk supervisor sees that the go-back cart is full and asks me to return the products. I smile and say, Me, sorry, supervisor. Karen manager said I was wasting time and I am no longer allowed to return products. The supervisor gives me a weird look, but just shrugs and tells another coworker to do it instead. This cycle continues on for the next month. One day, the store manager happens to be manning the front desk. The end of the day rolls around, and he looks at me and says, Store manager, hey, we have a lot of go-backs, and I need you to return them. Me, sorry, store manager. I'm not allowed to do go-backs anymore on account of slacking off. Store manager looks frustrated and says, Store manager, I don't care if you are allowed to or not. I am telling you to take these back. Me, sorry, store manager. Karen manager told me I am not to do any more go-backs no matter what, and I'd better follow her orders. Karen manager told me that this is her department and that she is the boss. Store manager looked pissed and stormed into the manager's office. A few minutes later, store manager called Karen manager to his office over the intercom. Karen manager came waddling out of her office and went into store manager's office. The door closed, and we could all hear muffled yelling. After about 10 minutes, the door opened, and Karen manager shuffled out. She glared daggers at me and told me to come to her office. I happily complied and said, Me, yes, Karen manager, how can I be of assistance? Karen manager, you are allowed to do go-backs again. That is all. I smirked and left her office, happy that I could put a Karen in her place. Update. I'm surprised a lot of people enjoyed my story. I will continue sharing stories from this job and a hospital I used to work at. Hope you all enjoy them. Update Part 2. I forgot about Rule 8. Hopefully op doesn't really count. Everything else should be fixed. Story 2. Cast: Karen Manager, Store Manager, Meat Department Manager, Grocery Department Manager. This story takes place about 2 months before I left my job at a grocery store and started my first year of college. It has a bit of background information, so please bear with me. I was thrilled when I finally got to put Karen Manager in her place. For months, things had been running fairly smoothly, with business as usual. However, everything changed when our old store manager left to open another branch. A new store manager took over, and unlike the last one, this manager was professional, kind, and made a point to recognize employees in various departments for their hard work. This shift in attitude didn't sit well with Karen Manager. She wasn't pleased with the recognition that lower employees were getting. Around the same time, I noticed an influx of new hires. Everyone's hours were being reduced, and I later found out that this was a cost-cutting measure. The company was hiring more part-time employees to avoid paying higher wages. Determined to keep earning money for college, I decided to approach Karen Manager about picking up extra shifts. I walked into her office and said, "Hey, Karen Manager, I've noticed my hours have been cut, and I was wondering if I could pick up extra shifts somewhere." She scoffed and replied, "Karen Manager, it's a department-wide decision. If you want hours, go to another department. But I wouldn't waste your time." I was confused and asked, "Why not?" With a smug smile, she said, "Karen Manager, they only take hard-working employees in their departments. You wouldn't fit in." Her words left me stunned. I thought her behavior had improved, but clearly I was wrong. I stood there for a moment, unsure of how to respond, before turning and leaving her office. I wasn't sure if Karen Manager had already bad-mouthed me to the other department heads, but I decided to give it a shot. My first stop was the meat department, where I explained my situation to the manager. I told him about the reduced hours and asked if I could help out in any way. The meat department manager smiled kindly and said, "Meat Manager, I understand how frustrating low hours can be. One of our guys is on vacation for a few weeks, and we've been struggling to keep up with cleaning all the pans and plates for our meat section. It's just washing and drying simple work. You can even wear headphones as long as it's within reason. We'll pay you starting meat associate wages. Interested?" I beamed and immediately accepted the offer. The work was straightforward, and I took it seriously, hoping to prove that I was reliable and hardworking. For 3 weeks, everything went smoothly, but when their missing associate returned, my help was no longer needed. Fortunately, I had already spoken with the grocery department manager the day before. I explained my situation, and she was understanding. "Grocery manager, we need someone to tidy shelves, stock products from aisle carts, and help unload trucks when they arrive. It's starting grocery associate pay. Does that work for you?" Since this position also came with a pay bump, I happily accepted. Everything was fine until the grocery department hired a full-time employee, and I was sent back to my original department. That's when things took an unexpected turn. On my first day back, Karen Manager called me into her office. "Karen Manager, what do you think you're doing? I told you our department's hours were cut." "I know. You told me I could try other departments. You also made some rude comments I won't repeat, but I didn't take any hours from our department." She glared at me and said, "Karen Manager, you're making our department look bad. We're trying to cut costs, and you're burning through hours we don't have." Fed up with her nonsense, I calmly replied, I took hours from other departments that were short-staffed and had hours to spare. I've done nothing wrong." Her tone grew angrier. "Karen Manager, it's not fair for others in our department if you get full-time hours and they don't." I stood my ground. This system of hiring countless part-time employees is flawed. It hurts quality workers who need the hours. If you keep hiring this way, others will follow my lead and seek work in other departments that need help. Her face turned red with frustration. Karen manager, if you don't like my management practices, you can leave. Without missing a beat, I smiled and said, "Okay, I will." I turned in my badge, clocked out, and said goodbye to my coworkers. It was bittersweet, but I was relieved to be free of Karen manager's toxic behavior. The next morning, I was enjoying a rare chance to sleep in when I got a phone call from the new store manager. "Store manager, good morning, up. Sorry to bother you, but could you come back to the store?" I reviewed what happened yesterday, and Karen manager was completely out of line. I spoke to the other department managers, and they all praised your work ethic. We're short-staffed and could really use you back. I smiled, feeling validated. Me. If you transfer me to the grocery department with the pay increase and grocery manager as my boss, I'll come back. I'll still help out in other departments if needed, but I don't want Karen manager to have any authority over me. Store manager. Done. I just processed the transfer. Karen manager will no longer be involved in your work. I'll also be addressing her managerial practices. With a smirk, I said, "Great, I'll be there in 10 minutes." When I walked into the store, I collected my belongings from the store manager and shook his hand. As I looked over at Karen manager's stunned expression, I couldn't help but chuckle. These last few weeks at the store were going to be the best yet. Story 3. I recently told a tale of my old workplace over in another revenge sub, and I thought of another one, but it didn't involve me. I worked with a chain of fast casual restaurants that I'll still only refer to as Emerald Wednesday. I ran the dish pit at the time of this story, and the restaurant was still fairly new, and still one of the only places to eat in a decently sized town right on the dead end of a large highway. So, we were usually very busy. One of the cooks had earned the nickname Angry Mike years before coming to our place. Several of the guys knew him, and he was a generally hard worker, if not very cantankerous when things get hectic. If you worked hard, he respected you. If you were a screw-up, you were useless to him. As an example, he hated to work with one slow-line cook who bumbled about all the time, making more trouble than he was worth. So, Angry Mike put down a square made of tape on the floor and told the guy not to leave that spot until the rush was over. It worked, and there was considerably less cursing that night. Anyway, we also worked with a server who went out of his way to be a douchebag to everyone. Actually, I take that back. He treated everyone else as if they were beneath him, especially people who ate meat, as he was a lifelong vegetarian. But he really put the screws to Mike for some stupid reason. They just never liked each other. The douchebag server would always ask for rushed items when we were busy, added items late to orders that were starting to go to the tables, barked at Mike like he was a servant, and things like that. And of course, with a nickname like Angry Mike, Mike would flip out every night after close cursing out the douchebag's name, and even walking off a couple of times during the rush to cool off because the douchebag had yet again gotten under his skin. One time, Mike worked a morning shift to cover for one of the morning crew, and douchebag treated him like garbage yet again, and then had the audacity to order a vegetarian burger from Angry Mike, telling him that it had better be good. Oh, it was good all right. Mike sliced the patty in two and stuck a couple of pieces of bacon into it and sealed it back together before preparing it. He called the douchebag over and handed him the plate with the best grin he could muster. Best part? The douchebag came back and told Angry Mike that it had been the best burger that he had ever eaten. Mike just took the compliment, likely thinking he would get fired for screwing with the dude's food. As an addendum to how much of a douchebag that server was, he quit midway through a particularly busy Mother's Day shift, the busiest day in the year for many restaurants. I was talking with one of the managers when he strolled up, said, "I don't work here anymore," and left. Story 4. Backstory: my daughter is disabled. She has nonverbal autism and traumatic brain injury, which means she looks relatively normal, but she is profoundly disabled. I rarely take her out into public alone because she is so hard to manage, especially now that she is almost 9. Not only will she not stay with me, she will bolt like a greyhound, scream, rip things open, steal toys from babies, and otherwise be an impossible nuisance. For this reason, I almost always order what I need for delivery, including groceries. However, life is unpredictable sometimes, and I every so often have to brave a trip to the grocery store. A few years ago, the gods smiled down on me when the local grocery store I prefer started using the Caroline cart. If you don't know what that is, it's a special cart with a large seat for disabled children who are too big for the toddler seat. They park it with the scooters and wheelchairs with a big blue handicap marker on it, so that parents don't mistakenly use it for their older, able-bodied children, but admittedly, this doesn't seem to stop them. I see people using it all the time, like one of the carts with a toy car attached for their kids to drive while they shop. This particular day a few weeks ago, the snow was so heavy and intense that not only was school canceled, but so was my grocery delivery. I would have to go to the store with my daughter. As usual, I walked in praying that the Caroline cart would be available, and thank goodness it was. Strapping my daughter into the seat, it has a 5-point harness, I started shopping. As usual, my first stop was the bakery to get a free cookie. They always hand them out to kids. I noticed right away that there were a lot of other kids there that day, and assumed that many parents were like me, saddled with their kids during the snow day and unable to get grocery delivery. The bakery was hopping, and there were a number of parents and kids waiting for a new batch of cookies to be ready. One of the mothers seemed particularly harried, and I cannot say I blamed her. Her daughter, around age 5, was having a meltdown. She was angry, crying, shouting, demanding a cookie. Entitled mother, "They aren't ready yet, honey, we just have to wait." Noticing the glances of everyone around her, she looked defensive but apologized, saying, "I'm sorry, she's very tired, it's past her nap time." No one said anything. We were all parents, we understood. My daughter did not like the noise, and as she often does when she is irritated, she was stimming, that is, flapping her hands or pushing a fist into her ear over and over. I got out her Minnie Mouse phone and handed it to her, and she calmed down and started playing with it. Looking over, the entitled mother saw us and looked inexplicably relieved. Entitled mother, "Oh, thank goodness. That cart wasn't there when we came in. Do you mind if I use it? My kid is exhausted." Me, oh, I'm sorry, but my daughter actually needs it. She's disabled." The entitled mother blinked and looked at my daughter playing quietly with her toy. "She doesn't look disabled. What's wrong with her? Can she walk?" I was flabbergasted at how insanely rude that was. Yes, she can walk, but she would run off in a hot second. I can't hang on to her and shop at the same time." "So you're using the disabled cart because your daughter doesn't listen to you? Look, she's much older than my little girl, and she seems fine. We really need the cart." She started coming over, and I protectively pulled the cart closer to me. No, she has autism." "Everyone has autism. That's not a real disability." I was pretty pissed at this point. "The cart is for disabled children, like you just said, not sleepy children. Why don't you use a car cart?" "There aren't any car carts. Besides, I can't see her in that. Just let me use the cart." The shouting upset my daughter again, and she started doing the thing where she punches her ear over and over. It was the first time she looked abnormal, and the woman looked visibly distraught and sort of grossed out. By now, other people were paying more attention, and this wonderful older woman said, "Older woman, ma'am, autism can be a very severe disability. Look, you're upsetting the little girl, and the cart is for disabled children. You need to stop now." I mouthed a silent thank you to the older woman, wishing I could go hug her, because that was some Wonder Woman-level intervention to speak up that way. But my daughter was upset, so I decided to skip the cookie and just leave. So I turned the cart around and walked off. No one stopped me, but the same older woman who had stood up for me saw us waiting in line and insisted I go in front of her so I could get home. I was so grateful. My little girl was at that point, possessively clutching the string to a helium balloon I was intending to buy, but I was debating how to get it away from her so it could be scanned without making her flip out, because you can't just take stuff from her. The kind old lady saw my struggle and reached out to tear the scan code sticker off the string and put it with her purchases. "I've got it." She winked at me and my little girl and said, "I think you could use a little extra kindness today." "Oh no, it's an $8 balloon, really." "I insist." I thanked her profusely and left with tears in my eyes, touched. I love it when people try to make my day a little easier. Edit: for those commenting on the price of the balloon. Yes, $8 is very high for a balloon, but they go as high as $12 at that store depending on the size and shape. It was a large balloon in the shape of a teddy bear. My daughter loves balloons, and I usually get them from the dollar store, but we weren't at the dollar store, so it was a splurge, mostly because of the entitled mother upsetting her and skipping the cookie. For those saying the entitled mother wasn't that bad, yes, she was. She had no right to rudely demand to know what my daughter's disability was, let alone cut me off before I could finish answering her, and she said autism isn't a real disability. Furthermore, she wanted a cart she knew was for disabled children for her daughter because her daughter was sleepy. Not every entitled mother story results in attacks and arrests, thank goodness. Thank you to those showing your support. I really appreciate it. Story 5. Do I really not visit my family enough? I'm so incredibly drained by their constant demands. I confirmed plans with my dad for my husband and me to come over today, and his response was, "Well, I'm gonna tell ya, I feel like you guys are always putting his needs or his family before your needs and your family. That's not fair." What? Are you serious right now? I'm a grown adult who still bends over backward to meet my family's every need like a child. You need money? I provide it. Need a driver? I'm there. Babysitting? Sure, I'll do it. House sitting while my mom and stepdad are on business trips? Yep, that's on me too. Want me at an event? Just give me the time and place, I'll make it happen. And all of this is unpaid because, of course, it's for family. Meanwhile, I'm juggling a full-time job, married life, weekly appointments for my various disabilities, and daily responsibilities, all while barely managing to work full-time in the first place. Not to mention, I visit multiple times a month outside of the times they specifically need me. Despite all this, it's apparently never enough. Nothing I do ever seems to satisfy them. I'm exhausted. My husband, on the other hand, sees his family maybe once every 3 or 4 months, if that. At this point, it's not even fair to him. My dad is so far off base, it's actually the opposite of what he's claiming. My husband and I haven't seen his mother since Thanksgiving, but we visited my dad twice just this week alone, and are about to go again today. And let's not forget the week before that, and the week before that, and so on. Here's the message I sent back to my dad. I don't see how. My cousin just spent half a week with me. I was at Nana's for Christmas, and I went to see Ninny and Papa too. We visit you several times a month. I go to all my siblings' events whenever they say they need me. I'm there. He never gets to go to his family's events. He hasn't even been able to attend a single one of his brother's basketball games. He has had to cancel plans with his family because someone from my family demanded we be somewhere, and it's unfair to him. I've never canceled plans with mine for his. He sees his family once every few months. Next weekend, he's finally going to see his grandmother for the first time in 4 years, and I'm meeting her for the first time too. He's met my entire family, and I'm always seeing all of you with or without him. But I've only met his parents, one set of grandparents, and siblings, and we're married. That's how little he gets to see his family. It's been over a year since he or his siblings have even seen their dad. In fact, no one can even reach him. We went to his mom's for Thanksgiving and yesterday for a late Christmas. Before Thanksgiving, it had been months since we visited her. Tonight, we're coming to your house for your Christmas celebration. We saw you at Nana's for Christmas, and I visited you a few days before that too. Not to mention, I see Mom and my siblings multiple times a month. His response? Well, maybe it's just me. I feel like you all do that too, because you definitely do not come visit me several times a month. And I invite you all almost every single week. I'm 10 minutes away, and it's maybe once a month that you come by, sometimes not even that. And you've never ever not one time invited me and your brother to come visit and spend time with you at your place. First of all, I visit him every Saturday, and if I can't make it on Saturday, I go on Sunday evening. Second, he invites us to church, not just to hang out. We follow a different religion, and I've told him repeatedly that I'm not going to his church or any church. I'm extremely uncomfortable with it, yet he still asks every Sunday. Sorry, but not only do we have different beliefs, we're the exact type of people his denomination loudly and proudly condemns. Third, he lives 30 minutes away, not 10. No idea where he got that number. Fourth, we don't invite my side of the family over besides my cousins because they're incredibly judgmental. Some have even shown up uninvited, making rude comments about our roommate. Yes, we're married and have a roommate. Housing costs are steep here. Our dog, our decor, our lifestyle, and even how I supposedly don't do a good enough job cleaning the floors. We have a high-shedding dog, so the floors will never be completely free of dog hair, but I put a lot of effort into keeping the place clean. My dad has complained repeatedly about the shedding, and my brother is terrified of dogs. So why would we invite them over when they clearly don't want to be here? I'm just so completely drained. It feels like everyone is pulling me in different directions and demanding my time without any regard for what I'm going through. I already do so much, don't I? Honestly, I don't know anyone my age 22 who spends as much time with their family as I do. Some of my peers haven't spoken to their parents since they moved out. One of my friends has only seen her family 3 times this entire year. In my opinion, my dad should feel fortunate to have any time with me at all. I'm trying to build a life of my own while managing all these other responsibilities. I deserve a little grace. It's exhausting having to justify my choices when I'm already doing everything I can. Edit. Update tonight. My dad attacked and physically assaulted my husband right in front of me. When my mom and stepdad found out, they said, "Good, he deserved it." I've decided to cut all contact with my parents and stepdad, and we're pressing charges against my dad. Story 6. IV worked as an independent contractor in the IT field for over 20 years, doing all manner of things from creating simple HTML sites to managing a big hotel's completed infrastructure. One of the many clients I had back in the day I was coding big-ish custom websites was a rental company. Now I had heard a lot of warnings about not working with this guy that owned it. He had a reputation that he was sharp as a tack, backstabbing and conniving. He was a lawyer after all. So I went into the partnership with that in mind. He wanted a new website for his renting gig, where people would list their home for rent. Renters would sign up and pay a subscription to the site, and he would get the whole lot. Nothing out of the ordinary there. So we make a pretty good deal on paper. We sign it, and I get started on the project. Coding everything in PHP goes well, but he demands suddenly that I show him progress only a week into the process. He wants to see the website front now. This is just the tip of the iceberg. I tried explaining to him that the front-end work isn't scheduled to start until after 6 weeks of back-end programming, and that I only had pure code to show right now. The contract we signed clearly states this. He then gets on his high horse and demands that I put everything on hold to do the front-end first, design, and then program. I, being really young at the time and fairly naive, agreed to this without asking for it to be added to the contract as an addendum, and started working on the design now. Now, the contract stated that I was given free rein of the design decisions as long as I maintained the same color scheme and used the same logo on the site. So I made a fast draft in Fireworks. This was back when it was a Macromedia product, before the Adobe acquisition, and within 2 days I showed him. He's not impressed and demands a different direction and sets up a list of demands. I, as always, aim to please the customer and do just what he wants. I design a new layout with his list of demands, but he doesn't like that either. That's how the next 3 months go. A never-ending circle where he is never happy with anything. Now close to 4 months into the project, he demands to see a working showcase of the back end. I point out that he himself changed the order in how the project was being done and had demanded that I do the front-end design first instead of the back end as stated in the contract, which he now turns on me and says, yes, the contract we both signed says you will have a working back end to show me at the end of the month. If you don't honor that, I will have to take my business elsewhere and seek compensation for your lack of professionalism. Okay, I now have 12 days to do a back end for the site. So I get a friend to help me, and we work tirelessly through a weekend, and I have a good base to work from in 9 days. Mind you, at this point he has only paid the security on the contract, about 5% of the total price, and has shielded himself from paying by hiding behind, well, if you can honor the contract, why should I? Finish Roman 20 work, and then I'll pay as per the contract. Remembering now all the warnings I had heard about this guy, I decided to add a special function to the code just to be safe. More on that later. So, now it's the end of the month. We have a front-end design he is okay with, a back-end that has been finished to about 85% of what is required according to the contract, and I still have 1 month left to finish everything else. Time for show and tell. Since I was working on this development, I was running it on my own dev server and showed him this in a browser on his computer. I mentioned to him that since I only had 512 kbit slashes upstream from the server, it might lag a little, but it wouldn't when it would be put on the productional server he has his website on at his hosting company. He says that's okay and the demonstration goes on. As I am showing him the site, both front-end and back-end, I can see he is immensely happy with it, although he would never say so out loud. He is trying to hide his smile that pops up regularly and his eyes gleam with all the added ways he can now start making money from. Anyway, he now says that it is way too slow, this is wrong, that is wrong, blah blah blah. I want you to put it up on my prod server and see how fast the speed is, he asks me. Okay, no problem, I can make that happen. Please pay 50% of the contract and I'll get right on it. I then wait a few days, and then I get an email from him where he includes a forwarded message from the bank detailing a transaction from him to me to the amount of the 50% I asked for. So I push the system to his prod server so he can take a look at it under beta, his domain TLD. I then send him an email stating that he can try the system with the supplied credentials. What he doesn't know is that I knew he had been fishing around for another programmer to do this project, to pick up from a lazy deadbeat who couldn't do anything right. So I knew he would most likely try to screw me. What I also suspected was that the email he sent me with the transaction proof was a fake, which it ended up being. Pro Revenge 1. Remember that small function I mentioned? Well, what it did was if user X, his user, tries to remove user Y, my admin, from the system without one setting being changed in the configuration first, the system will first delete and purge the database and then remove all the documents in the web root. Well, not 5 minutes after he reads the email from me, he does just that. He tries to delete my admin user from the system to lock me out. Guess who has nothing of the project left? He does. Pro Revenge 2. Since it is considered forgery to spoof an email, especially from a bank, I sent the information to the authorities and he goes under investigation by both the police and the bank lawyers. Pro Revenge 3. I sold the system to a competitor of his for a better price than originally contracted to him, and last I knew he was now blacklisted from owning a company as well as he lost his right to work as a lawyer. I only got that 5% he paid at the beginning, and for working for just over 5 months on this project that is hardly anything. But the knowledge of his demise will keep my heart warm for the rest of my life. Edit. Since so many people assume this happened in the States, I just wanted to say that I'm from a small country in Europe. The laws and regulations here are different than in the States. We have a government agency here that has everything to do with registering companies, and they do keep track of who's who. If you are a serial startup guy who leaves nothing but burnt ashes behind you, you cannot do it here, You have to register the owner and members of the board of the company if there is one. If you have a prior history of failed companies or you've broken the law in some regard, you are blacklisted at that establishment.